Today is 3/29/20, and we're going to title this video Cheap at Any Price, and hopefully by the time we get to the end of it, you'll see why. Okay. Alright, so this is a gun we finished. It is very similar to a gun you saw in another video, except this is a 30-06. 30-06 Springfield that will accept factory ammo, and it is a repeater. And the reason we're showing this as an example is because we're about to build another one, except in 7 mag, like the original. The only difference between these two guns will be that there's the size of the bolt face. This had a 30-06 308 bolt face in it. This has a mag bolt face. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to show what the actual component cost is for one of these guns. Because people always call me up. They're always like, well, will you give me a quote? Or, you know, can you tell me how much is it going to be? Whatever. And I always say no. Because really we don't do quotes. What we do is we add up the actual cost of the components. In other words, what we actually paid for them. We do not mark them up. We add all that up, and then we put a flat build fee on it, and that is the cost of the gun. Now, one thing I want to make clear here is that is the gun alone. Because obviously, if I do load work for it, if I build and load ammo for it, if it has a scope, if it has rings, I mean, there's a whole bunch of different things that can add to the price of the gun. Also, if it has to be shipped. I mean, if it's being shipped to Georgia from Idaho and it's being insured at full value, I mean, it costs, you know, $250. It costs quite a bit. We ship FedEx. All right, so before I even pick this stuff up, or actually maybe not, maybe as I go through it. So, okay, this is a Macmillan HTG McWoody, okay? This right here is the actual cost of that stock, $577.60, and you will notice that I have that right here, $577.60. Okay, this is a bat receiver, and I've showed these before, and all I can ever say about these is, given a choice, I would always prefer to use a bat receiver. This is a bat HR with a 20 MOA rail in it. This is their top of the line, small bolt handle, fluted, right bolt, right port. These are very, very, very nice. Now, when I show this, you have to understand that the price on this is because we buy a lot of these, and this is a multi-receiver discount. So if you're buying one of these from one of their distributors, it's going to cost more. But the price on this receiver that we actually pay is $1,625. And that's if you buy multiple ones of these, because that's a multi-receiver discount. And again, I've showed these before, but if you want to come in and look at that, I mean, these things, they are really, really, really nice. And like I said, the only difference between this one and that one is this has a mag bolt face on it. That one had a 30-06 308 bolt face on it. Okay, so price of this receiver, $1,625. We'll go back over to the board once we lay all this out. All right, so next thing, bottom metal. This is a Hawkins BDL style bottom metal. Just for this piece of bottom metal, $167. Okay? This is my favorite trigger. This is a Huber 2-stage. Very, very nice triggers. I mean, I love these things. This is what I'm always hunting with. This trigger costs $358.33. All right. Okay, I can't read it backwards. All right, very nice trigger. Just a basic BDL style box, $14.99 at Brownells. Okay? This is the solid follower, by the way. I use the heavier ones, the nice ones. That stupid follower costs $32.99. Again, that's a nice one though. Same deal at Brownells. This is a spring, $12.99 for a spring. Okay, this is a Krieger 10 flute, 5.5 sporter. This is 1 in 9 and it's for 7mm. Okay, just the barrel, $495. Now, we send these barrels out and we get them cryoed. And so that is the price, $115 to have the barrel cryoed, and that's for shipping both ways also. To send it there, have it cryoed, and have it shipped both ways and returned to us. Okay, so if you come over here and look at the board, what we end up with is, we end up with a stock at $577.60, a BAT HR at $1625, a Krieger 5.5 fluted at $495, cryo at 300 below, $115, that's including shipping, a Hawkins bottom metal, $167, a Huber trigger at $358.33, a follower at $32.99, a box at $14.99, a spring at $12.99, and that brings us to, and this is US dollars, $3,398.90. Now, so that is just the parts. You realize what I'm saying here? $3,398.90 just for the parts. Now, you realize we haven't done anything. That is simply all these parts laying on the bench that you see there. And that's what it costs us just to get them here, just to be ready to build. So now, what you add on to that is an $1,800 flat build fee. That's how we figure out what we're going to charge, $1,800. Now, our average gun has 100 hours of labor. And truthfully, we used to tell people 80 to 100. If anything, it's more than that now. Most of they're probably 105, 110 hours of labor. So you realize that works out to $18 an hour. All right? So you end up with a price with $5,198.90. Now, here's the thing. Out of that $1,800, which would be $18 an hour, if you actually made $18 an hour, which you don't, but if you did, out of that, then you have to take everything to run the shop. And what does that include? Well, it takes heat. Why don't you show them heat? Obviously, you got to pay for heat. It takes air conditioning, okay? It takes electricity, it takes water, it takes all of this stuff. And we didn't even bother to include this. So, like that gun right there is Duracoated, all right? And so it just so happens this is the color. And I really like Duracoat, by the way. Very good product, but you have to use this stuff properly in the proper way, because in some ways it's also very dangerous. This is aged bronze. For this little bottle, $38.95. Now here's the thing. There's more than enough in this bottle to do 1, 2, maybe even 3 or 4 guns. But the issue is it has a shelf life. So out of a bottle, I might get 1 or 2 guns, and that's about it. It depends whether I'm doing stocks or just metal work. But just that little wee bottle, $38.95, and we have to buy this stuff all the time, because like I said, it goes bad. All right? You realize you have to bed a gun. Oh, wait. So to use this, you got to buy a new respirator every single time, because that stuff is fairly toxic, and I don't want to be trying to reuse a respirator. So 24 bucks for a respirator that you got to throw away every time. Now you realize also you have to bed the gun. We use multiple different bedding compounds. I have 2 shown here. Marine Text and Brownell's AccuGlass. Sometimes I use DevCon also. It depends on the application. But a little box of Marine Text, which again, you get more than 1 gun, but I truthfully don't know how many, it's $37.99. And you got to have it every time. Or if you're using AccuGlass gel, you can see the prices on here. 26 bucks for the one, $24.99 for the other. Okay, now we realize all of this is coming out of that $18 an hour. So you've got heat, you got air conditioning, you got electricity, you got water. You also have to operate the office. And it seems like we have to buy a brand new computer, a brand new desktop computer, like what, every 3 years? You have to buy a printer, you got to buy printer ink, you got to have paper. Okay, You also have to pay rent on this shop. We actually lease this shop. Beyond that, when you get into the tools, you realize that when you're running your machines, you're using tooling. So I have to replace, if you break, okay, so here, it might be just easier to show. So, say you take an end mill like this. This is a carbide end mill. It's a 3/8. It's a long one, and I use certain operations to reach down in the stock to when I'm doing inletting. I'm not sure, that end mill right there, those like $50. And it's carbide. If you even look at it sideways, it breaks. If you drop it on the floor, it breaks. It just shatters. So, you know, do you break one every time? Of course not. If you did, you wouldn't be doing a very good job. But your tooling wears and your tooling breaks, and all of the tooling is very expensive. The carbide inserts are expensive. Even just basic high-speed steel is expensive. One other thing that people don't think about, like when you're running the lathe, and please just stay over there, I will show it to you, is, you know, you need cutting fluid. You know, and this stuff is about $30 a gallon. So actually my wife's saying, no, it's more than $30 a gallon, but it's about $30 a gallon. And I don't know, I go through a gallon of this maybe every, I don't know, 2, 3, every 4 guns. I mean, it's hard to tell. And it's kind of strange, you wonder where it goes, because it's getting sopped up in rags and just being sprayed all over the place, but it goes somewhere. It disappears. Hopefully it's not going into my lungs. Sometimes I think that it is. So you have to take all that out of that $18 an hour. The other thing you need to take out of that $18 an hour, and I'm a little bit sensitive about this, and you should probably listen carefully to what I'm about to say. So you realize there's lots of guys that build custom guns, but there's almost nobody that gives you custom-made bore guides with your gun, okay? And this is something that really matters. So this stuff, this comes in 4-foot rods. It's a settle, it's 7/8, and then you end up with it like that. So each piece ends up being about $4.50 for the raw material. But then to build this, and you notice this one does not fit this gun because it's not for this gun, all right? They fit really tight, really right, because I make each one on the lathe individually. And I'm gonna say something. You gotta realize, before I ever built custom gun, I bought a lot of them. There was a couple guys, and these names that you would recognize, they're old men now, but they made custom bore guides for every gun. Well, I'm gonna say this as simple as I can. If you care about your gun, if you care about your customer, if you care about doing things right, you're going to receive a custom bore guide with every gun. If you go buy a gun, you pay $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 for a gun, and the guy doesn't give you a custom-made bore guide with it, I'm telling you the guy doesn't care about you, and he doesn't care about the gun. And he certainly doesn't care about accuracy, because this is important. And you notice how long the cartridge part of that is. I literally, when I make them, I make it so that it goes the whole way down and runs right up to the throat. In other words, it protects when you're using your rod and you're using a patch, you're using a brush. It offers as much protection as can be offered. And again, I make each one individually. And it takes, I don't know, I don't think I can ever make one. On a really good day, maybe I can make one in less than an hour. Maybe. Sometimes on a bad day, it takes more than that. I just dropped my end cap. Oh, and there's something else too that I've noticed. You know, these guys build custom guns, but they don't give you anything to protect your muzzle. Well, every gun that we build has a muzzle protector. Because if you're going to put this in a scabbard, you're going to put this in a case, whatever. If you're just going to carry it around. And this one is just my generic one. We have tighter ones that actually go on customer guns. It protects your muzzle. That crown is really important. And so same thing, I'm saying if they're not giving you a muzzle protector, I mean, how serious are they about accuracy? How serious are they about their work? I say not very serious. Another thing that we also do, that again has to be taken out of that 18 bucks, is we include a reduced shell holder with every gun we build. Okay, this just happens to be, this is a number 3 RCBS, well, of course, for 30-06. And this shell holder has been reduced from about .500 tall, they're usually about 0.500, 0.501, 0.502. I take 25 thousandths off of them. In other words, lower the height of the shell holder 25 thousandths. And you're going to say, okay, well, why do you do that? Well, first we have to acknowledge that there are tons of, in quotations, custom guns being built that do not have custom chambers in them. They have SAMI spec chambers in their custom gun. In other words, it's the exact same chamber that would be in a Savage 110 or a Remington 700 or 1,000 other guns we could name. If you just paid $8,000 or $5,000 or whatever you paid for a custom gun, to me, it should have a minimum spec chamber in it. A true minimum spec, not a SAMI spec. So if you're going to have a true minimum spec chamber that was set up off of, say, specific brass for a specific bullet, specific dummy rounds. In other words, we make dummy rounds, and we send our dummy rounds to Dave Manson at Manson Precision Reamers, which I showed on the beginning of this. We send our dummy rounds to him, and we ask that he make the reamer as close to the dummy as possible. All right? That it'll function, yes, but that there's not a lot of slop. Because one of the things people do not realize, in a SAMI spec chamber, there can be a lot of slop radially, and there can also be a lot of slop longitudinally, lengthwise. All right? So when you put a minimum spec chamber in a gun, the brass just fits. In other words, it just fits in the gun. Everything is nice and tight. Some of them, he gets them so perfect that it fits nearly flawless. I mean, it's like one piece. So what happens then? When the cartridge goes off, there's no room for it to expand. If it can't expand, it doesn't work hard. In other words, it never exceeds its elasticity limit. In other words, because in a normal chamber, it goes off, it exceeds its elasticity limit, it's kind of hard to get back out. Then you take it and say you're going to use a standard, wouldn't matter, it doesn't matter whether it's a Hornady or a RCBS or whatever. You use a die that takes that and pushes that piece of brass down below what factory original spec was on that piece of brass. And that's how you get it to go back in the gun. And that's also why it work hardens, and that is also why that it grows in length. Guys who have SAMI spec chambers, their cartridges are always growing. Guys who have minimum spec chambers, their cartridges are never growing. You trim one time. Now here's, and again, without getting in too deep, because this is not a reloading video, if you have a minimum spec chamber set up properly, and you do all your brass prep properly, many times you can fire that same piece of brass 2, 3, 4, 5 times and never do anything to it. In other words, never any resizing, especially if you have the right neck diameter in it, because what happens is the cartridge goes off, it expands, but it doesn't exceed its elasticity, and I think it's actually its plasticity limit, and it snaps right back. So it's the same dimension it was before you pulled the trigger. So all you have to do is take that empty, knock out the primer. I clean my primer pockets, clean my neck by hand, seat a new primer, put powder in it, and reseat a bullet. And you never used a die. I mean, you need a die to seat the bullet, but what I mean is there was no die touching the case. The die touched the bullet, but it did not touch the case. And the case goes right back in the gun. And if anything, that's one of the reasons why we always write this on our targets. We write new brass. Your accuracy increases. All bench rest shooters know this. All right? The closer the brass fits the chamber, which you could almost say tighter, the more accuracy you get because it's more perfectly lined up. All right, so back to the reduced shell holder. What's the point of the reduced shell holder? Well, eventually in that process, you're going to need to bump shoulders. If the chamber that was in your gun is smaller than the die is, then if you try to take a fired case out of that minimum spec chamber and run it into the die will be bigger than the brass is. So what happens is you can't resize your brass, not with a standard die, because the die is already larger. The hole in the die is bigger than the piece of brass you're trying to put into it, which that has to be reversed for the die to be able to work. The die has to be smaller. So say you want to bump shoulders, you have to have a reduced shell holder. If you have a reduced shell holder, what that allows you to do is it allows you to take that die and to simply turn it down, turn the die down until it hits on the shoulder of the brass, not until it hits on the shoulder, on the top of the shell holder. You know, normal reloading, they want you to put the shell holder in, turn the die down till it touches. Obviously, the press can't go any further than that, and that's it. But since the die is generally smaller than the piece of brass you're putting in, it works. In other words, it's a system that works. All right, but if you have a minimum spec chamber and you want to bump shoulders, you have to have a shell holder that allows you to screw the die down until it hits on the shell holder, until it hits on the shoulder of the case and does not touch the shell holder. So, and generally when I screw one of these down, you know, you got daylight underneath it. I take 25 thou off of here, and you screw the die down until it touches the shoulder of the cartridge, and maybe you've got 10 or 15 thousandths clearance on the shell holder. I realize I'm getting in way too deep, but what I'm saying is if your gun has a true custom minimum spec chamber in it, you have to have some system of being able to resize your brass at some point. Because even with these guns, if it has a tight neck, if it has a tight chamber, even though you may get 1, 2, 3, 4, I have guys getting 5 firings out of a piece of brass before they ever touch it. In other words, they never do anything to it. Knock out the primer, like I said, put in new primer, put in new powder, seat a bullet, go shoot, and you get phenomenal accuracy. That's the whole point of all of that. Plus your brass doesn't wear out. You know, say in a 7 mag, which we're going to build out of this, a normal 7 mag with normal brass, normal dies, you might get 2 or 3 or 4, maybe 5 firings out of a piece of brass, and pretty much it's shot. All right, with a minimum spec chamber, with the right brass, the right dies, everything working in concert, you might be able to shoot that piece of brass 50 times. I mean, there are guys shooting bench rest, 6 PPC, that will wear a barrel out, completely shoot a barrel out, and they only use 20 pieces of brass. They just keep reloading it and reloading it and reloading it and reloading it, but they're not resizing it. Although, and again, this is not a reloading video, and I don't want to get too deep, you do realize that you can get custom-made dies that just barely full-length resize the case, and some guys go that way too. So you can do it either way. It's like there's 2 trains of thought, 2 schools of thought. One is don't do anything to the brass, keep using it in its original form until it won't go into the gun anymore. The other school is minimum full-length resizing every single time. And the truth is both of those schools of thought get really impressive results. So it depends. It depends on what you want to do. And you also realize, and again, I'm understanding I'm getting in deep here, but there's a lot of guys who have multiple sets of custom dies. In other words, you have a custom die that, say, sizes the case, the whole case, a half a thou, everywhere, all dimensions. You have a set of dies that size the case 1 thou, all dimensions. You have a set of dies that size the case 1.5 thou, and even up to 2 thou. There'll be guys who have 4 sets of dies, 4 sets of full-length sizer dies, and the internal dimensions differ by 1/2 thou in each one. Again, we're talking about bench rest shooting. But if you want your hunting guns to shoot 2/10 of an inch, I build a lot of them that'll shoot 2/10 of an inch at 200. I build a lot of guns that will shoot 3 or even 5 shots in under an inch, sometimes under 3/4. I've even had a few under 1/2 an inch at 400 yards. 400 yards away, and it's shooting 1/2 inch for 5-shot groups. If you want that level of accuracy, you have to learn to think and act like a bench rest shooter. And you have to incorporate the same procedures that they do from the beginning. From the very beginning, before you ever start to build the gun, you have to know how much you want, how much accuracy you want, and then tailor everything toward that end goal. All right, so that's why you get a reduced shell, a really long-winded explanation of why you get a reduced shell holder with every gun we build also. So now, we titled this Cheap at Any Price. So I want to try to communicate something that I have been trying to communicate to people for decades. And really, the only guys who actually get this are the guys who build guns. $18 an hour. Then you take everything out of that $18 an hour, and you end up at about $5 an hour. $5 an hour. That's what your wage is. If you're going to do this and build them to this level and put that amount of man hours in them, you are not going to make any money. It's impossible. I have guys that come here all the time that want me to train them. And one of the first things I tell them is, you can't make a living at this. You cannot do it. If you're going to do this to make a living, you're going to have to cut corners somewhere, because there's no way on earth you can put 100 hours of labor into it. You just can't do it. You can't. How can you live on $5 an hour when a brand new diesel pickup costs $70,000? I mean, it's impossible. Most of these guns, I can't afford my own guns. People think that's strange, but it's really very much the truth. I cannot afford my own guns. I will build a gun, and I will use it for a hunting season, and then inevitably someone will buy it off me because they think, oh wow, that must be some special gun because he built it for himself. No, it's just a gun I built that was available, and I took it and went hunting with it. So the deal is, building guns is not a way to get rich. And as you see, it's one of the reasons why when guys call me up and want me to give them a quote, it's why I don't want to do it. That if you, and I want to say this in the kindest way possible. You know, there's a saying that says, if you have to ask how much it costs, you can't afford it. Okay? And really, if you think about it, people who buy jets, people who buy Rolex watches, people who buy Ferraris, it's not like, hey, I'm going to haggle. I'm going to haggle over my new $500,000 Ferrari or my new $8 million or $10 or $30 million jet. They're not going to haggle over that, okay? They're going to say, hey, I want the leather seats, I want the blah, 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 and they're going to get it. You have to understand, custom guns are just like Rolex watches or jets or Ferraris. It is a luxury. It is not a need. If you want just a really nice, decent gun for $500, go buy a Savage 110 and the dang thing will shoot, and it'll do everything you need to do out to 300 or 400 yards. But if you want to shoot a monster whitetail on the other side of the canyon, 850 yards away, and you expect that bullet to hit exactly where you were aiming, then you come here. But what you don't do is nickel and dime. All right, I hope this helps you guys. No quotes. Thank you.